UFO Roundtable, the UFO Thinker and Pursuit of the Paranormal podcasts.
Okay, so welcome back to another monthly roundtable discussion. As always, myself, Frank, UFO Thinker podcast, as well as Ash and Greg from Pursuit of the Paranormal podcast.
Hello.
And
Hello.
UFO Identified. How are you doing, chaps? All right?
Wonderful, thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
All good. And back once again, the inimitable Dave Smethurts. How are you doing today, mate?
Very good, Frank. Inimitable, very good. Yeah,
I'm trying to get a bit creative with your intro, you see.
Yeah, very, very good. I'm in good form actually. I've got a bit of a bone to pick with Ash though. When he was doing his show on bloody on different extraterrestrial origins, when he was asked about the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, he said, "No, not for me. No chance." I was thought, you cheeky.
No, your article.
No, it was good. I'm only joking. Those shows are really. I've just been saying, you've done some great shows recently. Really good. The one with Holly, Jason Cleves. There's been loads of them. I don't know what you were good anyway, but I don't know what you've been doing, lads. It's fantastic. I've been really enjoying it. So there you go. And a tenner as usual, I think, isn't it, gentlemen? Afterwards,
yeah. Our PayPal.
Excellent. So yeah, getting stuck straight into the actual topics then. As usual, I'll do my little intros, or not so little intros as the case usually is, to introduce the topics, and then go around and get some thoughts from you guys. So first up is the delayed, hotly anticipated UAP report, which is supposed to have been released by the Arrow. So Arrow is the latest rebranded version of what used to be the AOIMSG, which was set up as a result of the Gillibrand Amendment in the 2022 NDAA. And the AOIMSG itself was following on from the UAP task force, which in the past was the central group responsible for compiling sighting reports from the military and generating analysis reports for release to Congress and also to the public as well. And this has been a bit of a convoluted evolution process. And this latest version, known as the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, obviously is still ongoing, but even that is due to be changed when this newest legislation passes, with the new name set to be the UAP JPO, which is the Joint Program Office, or to give it its full title, the Unidentified Aerospace-Undersea Phenomena Joint Program Office. Snappily named, but probably better than the AOIMSG name anyway. But yeah, many have questioned whether or not the kind of constantly shifting sands that this office in its various iterations is built on will have perhaps destabilised the whole process. The goalposts seem to have been moved constantly since the original UAP task force, and sometimes that's in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. And I put this down to a bit of that tug of war between those pushing for increased transparency and those that are seeking to bury this, and that kind of internal battle going on. And the AOIMSG itself has been described by many, as we've talked about on the roundtables quite a lot, as a bit of a preemptive strike by the DoD to sort of set up their own office before the Gillibrand Amendment actually went through, which then allowed them to sort of get more control and more ways they can wriggle out of the requirements of that legislation. And I sort of think that newest language that's in the current legislation for the fiscal year 23 is a response to that, like a massive toughening up of those requirements and doubling down by Congress. Essentially, Congress not taking no for an answer. But obviously, more wriggle out attempts will inevitably follow, and probably a tug of war will go on for many years to come. But getting back to the report specifically, because of that constantly changing requirements and parameters and wriggle out attempts and everything, has the Arrow actually had staff and resources to actually do anything at all? I've sort of wondered that in the past, whether or not they've been very much in this report, or whether there may be a delay, or perhaps no report at all. And it did sort of cross my mind that they might not have had the time or the resources to actually get anything going. And it seems that, well, there isn't a report just yet. So what are the reasons for this delay? Are we going to perhaps see this report at all? What's going to be in it? Is it better perhaps to receive no report at all than a nothing burger report? lot of different things to consider with it. So, what do you guys reckon of that? And perhaps start with you, Dave. I know you've got a lot to say on that one.
Well, I mean, we can see old Kirkpatrick, can't we? What a pillar of efficiency he was. He's just worse, if not, as bad or as worse. All saying how great he was, he got the job done, and what's he done? Absolutely nothing. So there you go. Not that I would like to say I told you so, but there you go. Anyway, you can tell I've not got much time for him, but he should have been out, shouldn't he, on the 31st. There was an New York Times article by Julian Barnes, which we all saw as a bit of a hit piece. And at first there was fears there was going to be a bit of a nothing burger or even a walk back. And then when it didn't appear, we thought, oh no, there might be a bit of retaliation getting in first, and they were going to go for that in the article. So we're thinking, oh, maybe it means a good thing. They think about it. Then there was absolutely nothing. So like you say, Frank, I think there's a pretty big battle going on behind the scenes. It could be that the report was submitted and sent back because it wasn't good enough. We don't know that. I mean, I've not heard that. There's not been any leaks. Or it could be that they've not got enough staff. So, and they haven't actually had enough staff to do it, and because remember this time, the first report was just basically a rehash of the UAP office report, those sightings. So it was all in one place. But this time, they might have been told they've actually got to all the different agencies and actually do something. Well, if they haven't got much staff, that could be a lot more time consuming. So it could be that, but so I've just been coming to think it's going to appear. But then I heard Danny Sheehan last night on Jimmy Church, and he was saying that office could well be disbanded. When this new legislation comes in, and I come to think anyway, there's some weird connection between the legislation and the report. I couldn't put my finger on it, but when I heard Danny speak, he seems to think that. He didn't say this, but the implication was it might not happen at all if they disband it. So they might just be waiting to see which way the wind blows on the report or on the legislation, and then that'll determine the contents. Or they might be thinking, well, we might not have to bother it, and we'll just delay it and kick it into the long grass. But it's certainly a bit weird. So my view has changed. I thought it's going to come out sometime, and it's probably going to have some quite good content. And the bigger the delay, to a certain extent, the better the content was going to be. But I'm now of the opinion it might just get kicked into the long grass. So there you go. That's what I think.
Yeah, and we were talking about that a bit before, weren't we, with Danny Sheehan's comments from last night. I don't know if we've all had a chance to check that out, but it was only literally like last night, so obviously pretty fresh, hot off the press, that one. But yeah, I think basically the legislation itself, like the actual wording, basically says that as soon as this legislation goes through, the current Arrow office will just basically cease to exist, and then it will be the new office with all the updated requirements and all the rest of it. But see, the thing I thought, even having read through all the proposed wording and everything, is that surely they still have to kind of, do the homework, like get it done, because it's like it almost seems a bit like you were saying, Dave, that like Danny Sheehan was sort of suggesting that they've gone, well, this new legislation, we're going to be redundant soon anyway, so we'll just not bother. And I really hope that that's not the case, because that'd be disgraceful, wouldn't it, really? I mean, with all the various changes, you'd hope that there'd be some kind of thread of continuity through it all, where they're actually doing some work on this thing, But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, do we? What do you reckon, Ash? Any thoughts to add on all that, mate?
Yeah, I think, this is why you just have to not get excited about this stuff when it's got these reports. Every 6 months, we're going to get these reports, this information. And it's like, well, they're supposed to do that, but in reality, what's actually going to happen? And we've seen it now, like literally, for the second report that's due, silence. It's just nowhere to be seen. And I think, like you said then, Frank, about if you think they are going to be made redundant, you have to sort of redo what they're actually doing with the office. And it's going to be so way down on the list of things they've got to do that it's just not a priority at all. I think for us, because obviously we're in it, and on UFO Twitter and stuff, we're always talking about it, it's big for us. But for the people actually doing it, it's probably just not any sort of priority at all. Especially with you got all the elections going on at the minute and stuff, that's going to be taking some of the sort of Congress people's sort of priorities and stuff as well. So it's one of them where, like Dave said, all you want to kick it into the grass and just think, yeah, that doesn't matter. No one actually really cares about that at the minute, so let's just not do it. So, yeah, it's it's wishful thinking, I think. And apart from that, if we got a report, I don't think there'd be much in it anyway. It's just, again, until we actually get something, it's not worth getting excited about. Until this has been published, this has been released, it's not worth even getting excited about. It's just getting disappointment.
Almost sets a bit of a worrying precedent as well, doesn't it? Because, I mean, there's only really been one other report, and that one was like on the day it was supposed to have been released. So, you know, with that, you think, oh, this looks pretty hopeful. They said they were going to do it on a certain date, and they actually did it. And, you know, there's things in it that are quite interesting, even though it's not like, you know, some kind of huge bombshells or anything like that. But we get to this one, it's not really been the case, has it? So, yeah, like you say, we're just going to have to wait and see if and when, you know, see what happens. What do you reckon, Greg?
So, coming from the outsider kind of view that I provide, I think that they will be checking what the public appetite is, not the UFO Twitter appetite, not what the UFO community appetite is, but what the global appetite is for it. And I think that's what we spoke about when the first report came out, and said, actually, to a lay person, it was actually a big story. But to everybody sort of from the UFO community, it wasn't so much that. So maybe I think there was stuff leaked before. There was a thing in the Daily Mail talking about 50% of the cases couldn't be explained. And maybe at that point, because there wasn't so much hysteria from the public, because obviously there's a lot of other shit going on at the moment with the wars, cost of living crisis, COVID still in all over the place, especially like China. And there's a lot bigger pressing things that the normal person has to deal with than are these objects in the sky real, which we all know they are, and the US government has said that they are. But is there the public appetite? Because they're going to have to go to the public for money. They've got NASA on board now doing their thing. So is there a need to, they could sort of like swallow it up around the back of the NASA thing and say, look, NASA are the forefront of all of the space exploration. Let's just pump it all into them. So if they keep it quiet, they're saying nothing is better than saying something. And I think as soon as they mention something, they either have to back it up or they have to explain more. By saying nothing, you can't get yourself into any further trouble. If you change all these acronyms, people just get lost. And I know after days leading up to and after the 31st of October, people are like, is it going to be here? There was like a website, one of the, can't remember, it was on Twitter, had got the link saying, click here to view the report as soon as it comes out. And it's kind of just lost steam. And I think, is it going to get to a point where it's too late for them to bring it out to have any kind of credibility? Don't know. So they can just let it fade out and the next story will come out soon.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of to consider like what your comments there kind of open up is like how much of this is strategic. Like, is it a case of like deliberately not releasing it and seeing what the reaction is to that? If there's absolute outrage on UFO Twitter, which there clearly is, UFO Twitter's been going crazy about this, you know what I mean, about the report not coming out. But like, is it a testing the waters thing? You know, those articles that came out, some of them, you know, sort of pre-debunking things and saying, oh, it's nothing, you know, nothing to see here. And other ones kind of saying, oh, actually, we've heard some to the opposite of that, very, very interesting thing. How much of that is kind of deliberate and how much of it is just speculation coming from, you know, outside observers? And again, like with the actual report not being released, is that incompetence? Is it, you know, the fact that there's been all these changes, or is it a deliberate thing? You know, that's interesting to think about.
You just have to look at the way COVID was handled in the UK And all the announcements came out before, like a week before. They were going, "You're not going to be able to see anybody for Christmas Day." There was massive uproar, and then they change it slightly by the time it comes out. So it's almost like they leak a lot, gauge the public reaction, and again, not UFO Twitter reaction, public, because it's the public as a whole. It's like 300 odd million people in America, and not all of those on UFO Twitter. So it's those kind of people that you've got to gauge the response from. And if nobody's that bothered, why would you resource it or pump money into it? That's just my thought. They can just let it die.
I don't think the battle is, though. I don't think the battle is with the people. I don't think the people know much about it, to be honest. I think this is a battle between the Congress and the government, and there's a battle about legitimacy. I mean, he promised, they went, Moultrie and Kirkpatrick went and promised Senator Gillibrand it was all going to get sorted out. This hasn't been sorted out. The Congress think they're being lied to. There's a lot of stuff about that. And I think this is a bit of, and I think it's serious for them not to have done this. And I think they're playing their old game of waiting to see what turns up. They're hoping they can put the fix in where if they don't pass this bill before the House of Representatives changes hands. And I think I don't think it's a you might be right. I don't know. That could be right. So I'm not dismissing that. But I think it's more about an internal battle, and I can't believe the chance. But it could just be incompetence. It could just be, like I said, that they're not able. They haven't got the people to actually get round all them departments. Because as I say, it is a different report this time. It was easy last time because they just had essentially a load of data somebody had already connected up, but they try to do it for real. But I can't see them just going, "Oh, let's just see how we go," because it's too serious. There's a lot of quite senior senators from big committees who control their appropriations who are waiting for this. But I do think they might be chancing their arm. I mean, ideally, they would walk it back. They'd knock this on the head, and then Bray would come back, say low information zone, and everybody would shuffle off after about 6 months. But I think it's gone too far for that now. So anyway, so that's my alternative view, but there could be a bit of both going on, in fairness, because I don't.
Yeah, I think it is just, for me, it's just low priority. Like, it comes into work, I'll focus on this today. Then someone else comes in, actually, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to do this instead. And that's how I think it is. And spending that much time changing the name of it, it's like, is that what's important? Like, it seems to be more effort put into actually like what it's going to be called rather than actually doing anything. Like, say, it could be staffing, resources, money, whatever. And they might just be waiting until like January comes around again.
Well, Ash, with that kind of attitude, they'll be right on the phone to you to head the department up, won't they? That'll be right. Oh God, he's just the type of fellow we want.
Like, my phones are my
not your attitude, obviously, Ash. The attitude that you're ascribing to them. God, yeah, that could be right though. That God, I hope it isn't.
You know, I was thinking as well. What's that? You might know, Dave. I know you follow the US legislation stuff quite closely. There's a date where they have to have the NDAA signed off by.
Yeah,
I think it's
1st of January.
The 1st of January.
Well, technically it's the end of the month, but it can be signed. I think it's up till 12 o'clock or something like that in January. So they've got, and that's if they don't do that, the appropriation, they technically haven't got a defence budget, which is why they tied it all in the first place. If you remember, they have strapped it all to that particular firework, knowing that if anybody tried to do it it mean there'd be no defence spending. And at the time, they didn't think that'd happen. Now, you also know the Republican fellow, whose name escapes me, who's going to be the new leader. They're attacking all the Democratic legislation on woke grounds, removing all the woke stuff. And the NDAA, as they would see it, has got bits of that in it. I don't think it has, but that's their political view. So they're itching to get in to stop it, aren't they? He said, "Oh, I wish they'd delay it." The new Republican leader. Well, that's like a lion saying to a gazelle, "Oh, I wish you'd slow down a bit before you got into that forest." No, so they've definitely got to do it before. They've got 6 weeks, but it's probably more like 4.5 weeks now. And I think they'll definitely. Well, what I think and what happens is a big difference. There might not be, but I think they've definitely got to pass it beforehand. That's when the hearing stuff might kick off.
Yeah, It's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a lot of these things that we talk about with like government secrecy and whatnot. There's a lot happening behind a curtain of secrecy that are not even necessarily secrecy in this case. It's just like, you don't get to see what's going on behind closed doors in these kind of offices and whatnot. But, it has crossed my mind that there's the legislation, this new tougher legislation for the UAP Joint Program Office is all tied up now in that congressional language, and I think that's pretty much a done deal. So the people who are actually working on this report, maybe they've just gone, well, we'll just delay it for a little bit, and inevitably it has to be signed off by a certain date. We'll just delay it, and then that new one's going to come in anyway, and then we're out of here, sort of thing. Whether it's the same people or just the requirements to actually create that report won't really matter at that point, because it'll be a new set of timelines in terms of reports being generated and whatnot. And it could be a combination of all of these things, couldn't it? It's difficult to say, but the proof will be in the pudding, as they say, and we'll see what happens. Anyone got anything else they'd like to add on the report delay?
I just think sort of been like, over the past 12, 18 months, 2 years, you've been quite lucky. You've been getting quite a lot of information from like official sources and stuff, and all this happening. Because it's been quiet, like the past 6 months, and we've not got this report, everyone's like itching to bite, like waiting for that something to happen, because that's not happening. Now it's like, what's going to happen? What is anything going to happen this year? We're going to get anything? It's just like waiting for something to happen. Because we've not got it, it's just a bit boring.
Good point, that.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about with it. I mean, the other thing is that if Bray at the hearing was saying that the original, how many was it now? I forget off the top of my head, 141 cases, was it, or something that they had in the original task force report? And he was saying that they've got something like another 400 that have come in because they sort of streamlined the reporting processes to get more information about cases. And obviously, again, if it could be a combination of that massive amount of workload of sifting through all of that and putting it into a report, along with, very low staff and poor resources and all of the changing of parameters of what they're supposed to be doing and the name changes and the midterms, the Ukraine and Russia thing going on in the world, all the rest of it, a combination of all of them things. It's not really looking good, is it, sort of thing? And, could be a mixture, like a bit of a perfect storm of all of this,
This report has been a roller coaster, though. That's what I was trying to say when I was first talking. You've been up and down. Is it going to happen? And it's been a bit like that. So I've gone from thinking, oh, they're going to do it. Not going to do it. So it's a bit of a weird one. It could be anything what we've been saying, really. It's so hard to call it, as the guys were saying. It's so difficult to say. But it has been a real roller coaster. Probably maybe a few more, loops yet, I suppose,
Yeah, well, we'll see. But I think we'll get on to, because it kind of ties into that, some of those big hype predictions that we said would come to fruition imminently last month when we did the roundtable. There was all this hype and speculation, and obviously one of those was that report. So we might as well go on to those next. So there was a point at the end of last month we talked about these hype and speculation type things going around, reaching a bit of a fever pitch on Twitter. Lots of big predictions being made by many people, and we said back then that it'd be interesting to revisit those predictions to see how much of it came to fruition and actually happened. And well, here we are a month later. And I'm not talking about naming and shaming like individual people for their predictions and stuff, because that could be a tricky path to tread. But, we'll just look at the predictions themselves and see how much of the actual things that were being discussed actually came to pass. So obviously there was the October the 31st report, as we just said. Many people said it was going to be disclosure, they're going to wheel out the bodies, and other people said it was going to be a nothing burger. And as we've just said, well, nothing happened at all, not even a nothing burger. It's like less than nothing. And then there was also the entity pictures from the Virginia, Brazil being that was cited there, and supposedly footage and photographs and things of that being. And perhaps even in connection with the New York Times front page was one of the things that had been doing the rounds. People were speculating that would happen. Obviously, didn't happen. And I don't think there's much news on the actual footage as well. I believe James Fox offered a huge reward of something like $200,000, I believe it was, for the footage. And, there were some discussions, but there's not really been anything concrete come forward. Apart from a couple of scam incidents. I believe Ryan Sprague from Somewhere in the Skies was offered the footage for 10,000.
10 grand.
And it's like, I'm not sure really. If there's already a 200 grand offer on the table, that seems a bit suspect, doesn't it? But, and then there was also back then some speculation about some of these other like relatively small things that were going on, like the NASA Mars photograph. Remember that? And the emergency meeting between the UK Defence Secretary and the US Defence Secretary that took place. Obama's comments on aliens and UAP in a video, and there was a lot of speculation. All this was tied together as part of some grand thread, which was suggesting that something huge was coming up. World-changing disclosure in literally the next few days. Obviously, none of it really actually panned out in the end, did it? Is there a sort of cautionary tale there? I'm sure, Ash, you'll definitely think that there is. So what do you reckon, mate?
I guess comes back to what I said a few moments ago about it's been quiet for a while, everyone's chomping at the bit, and then all these sort of hypes starting. And we see it so often on Twitter, on Reddit, on the groups, just someone comes along or some ideas come along, they pick up steam, and nothing happens. So everyone's like, just bullshit again. A few months down the line, same thing's happening again. Everyone's on the train again. It's like, get off the train, just wait for it to stop. Like, stop jumping on it, just wait. See if anything happens and then talk about it. I mean, it's just, there's too much going on, too many Billy bullshitters. Just want to get a bit of a name for themselves. Well, you see people they come along and get like 5,000 followers in like a couple of months, and it's all spouting bullshit, and like it's like they're saying what you want to hear, and that's why when the traction, more people talk about it, they get more popular. And like I say, with the recent stuff, a month ago, all that stuff you mentioned, obviously nothing's really come of it. I'm not sure there's anything's happening recently, like sort of the last week or so. I'm not sure. I don't been on Twitter too much. It's a really busy time of the year for UFO Identified. So I've not been on Twitter that too much the past week or so. But I've not seen anything that's sort of bringing up any more hype as we go into the end of the year. So I think it's just, I think that's it for the year for me, to be honest.
Yeah, sort of ride out the hype storm until the new year, and then deal with it all then. It's one of them, isn't it, at the end of the day? Yeah. Hyper's gonna hype, sort of thing. There's always going to be people out there that enjoy that side of things, and obviously there's a market for it, as it were. People do sort of engage it, and these things often do go viral, don't they? But got to just kind of take it all with a pinch of salt, really, I think. And Ash, that's why we love you, mate. You're always bringing us down to earth with these things.
Bringing you down.
What do you reckon, Greg?
Unfortunately, I'm very much on Ash's wavelength there. For everybody wants to be popular, regardless of what people say. They want to be liked. So there'll always be these people that come along, like I said, predict these events, predict these good things that are coming, tell you what you want to hear, massage the UFO Twitter ego a little bit, create this sort of hype. And we all sit here we've sat here months and months talking about people making predictions and such like, and nothing coming of it. But there's always that little nugget that you just want it to be true. And I think that's because there hasn't been anything concrete for a while now. And you think before the New York Times article in 2017, there was no real big hype trains coming this quickly and this often, very much like Ash said. So when nothing comes, people probably open a little bit more to being sort of whipped up into a bit of a frenzy, only to be let down yet again. Always a bridesmaid, never the bride type feeling. And I think it's that I get excited about seeing stuff, even if it's a certain account can't remember the guy's name, if it is a guy. And he's always saying that it's just coming around the corner. And just once you just think, you know what? It would actually be quite nice if anything these guys are saying, all this bullshit that's being said, would actually come true, because it would be nice. It would be nice. But the problem is, it always happens and it comes in waves that people expect a lot. We don't get much, but we're always fed just enough. So like the previous reports, we're always fed just enough to keep everybody a little bit happy. Just keep that little hype train just going and going and going. So it's a strange old place, UFO Twitter. I've been caught up in Elon Musk taking over Twitter in my news feed, so the UFO stuff gets pushed down with Elon Musk just going off on one at everybody about blue check marks. So yeah, I just mirror Ash completely for once.
Yeah,
downbeat approach to disclosure.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. And, taking these kinds of things with a pinch of salt is absolutely the right way to go. I mean, I think there's been some pretty interesting things happening as well, but that I've perhaps not been quite so sensational sort of thing. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, there's a lot of very good research going on, but it's not necessarily as like bombastic. You know what I mean? It's not the sorts of things that go as viral. And with these various like hype people that come along, it's kind of a case of like, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. If someone's telling you, I know something and disclosure's coming in 3 days, come back to my account tomorrow and I'll tell you more, it's probably worth taking that with a pretty large pinch of salt, isn't it? And trying to fish through and avoid all that side of things and try and find the more sensible research that's going on, a bit more deeply buried in the vaults of UFO Twitter. What do you reckon, Dave?
I mean, the field has always been riven with Billy bullshitters for decades, hasn't it? Let's be honest, a good phrase, that, Ash. And before 2017, it was a right for them because they could bullshit all they wanted and there was nothing really to contradict it. So we got a lot of groups of bullshitters. And in fact, a lot of those, stop swearing too much, Frank, you might get torn off the air. But anyway, they all become like the disenfranchised and annoyed sort of minority after 2017 to some extent because their gravy train had ended. So I think when 2017 came out, the field sort of got a bit more disciplined because there was more information. So I think it has improved to a certain extent. But I think you're right. I mean, the lesson for me is not to connect too many things together. And I think there's two types of things going on. I think it's a bit like football transfers. They might know a certain player could go to Manchester United. And so they say, oh, yeah, he's definitely going because they want to get clicks. And it's a bit like that with the UFO thing. They make up a theory like you guys were saying. Then they just put it out there and hope they get clicks, as you were saying. So there's all that. They all like to look at me, and there's a lot of that going on. But there's also, and I've talked to people who have told me things are going to happen. And they're not bullshitting me. They think it is. And something happens behind the scenes. Somebody does another move to knock it off there's an argument obviously going. And that has been genuinely derailed. And I think there's been an element of all these weird things like that thing on Mars and all the rest of it, which was interesting. All the other things you were saying, Frank, where people have falsely connected them. But I think there was a core of stuff that I think's been derailed. Like James Fox said something was going to happen, didn't he, on at the end of October? It didn't. I think Ross Coulthart alluded to something else. There's a few people said something. And I think if this battle's been going on, some things have been knocked off. I think there's a lot to what Ash says. We've been feasting on this diet of great stuff, and then people want to keep it going, and like you were saying, Greg. But I do think without all this, there has been a big step change since 2017. We've got this legislation in place, and it is different to decades ago. I think something is going to happen in the medium term, if not the short term. And I think when this legislation gets passed, I think we'll be in a slightly different scenario. So while it's the typical hype train and we should ignore it, I think the underlying situation is a bit different to it has been in decades before. So that's where I'm coming from. But the biggest lesson was not to connect too many things up, because I even know it when I'm listening to it. Oh no, you think no, you can't connect that. Even though, like you say, oh, that's great. That'd be great if that'd be true. You do get sucked into it a bit, but there's just too much going on, and there are a lot of clickbait merchants out there who they just love it, don't they? And they absolutely love it. But yeah, but I'm optimistic. Yeah, I totally agree. It's easy to fall into that trap, and you've not got to be gullible, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely, and it's about managing expectations as well, isn't it? You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Like this one Twitter account is going to solve the problem and reveal all the secrets to the mystery, and then obviously, a week later nothing happens, and you'd be pretty gutted. But if you just kind of go, oh, okay, another person saying that this thing is going to happen, let's see what pans out. And then you're not going to be too disappointed when it doesn't actually come to fruition, are you? But yeah, anybody got any other bits to add on that side of things? Well, we'll crack on with something actually quite interesting that happened, but is perhaps a little bit less, the sort of thing that would, get a lot of people retweeting it and being excited about it on UFO Twitter, but is very, very important nonetheless, which is recently announced was this effort led by veteran UFO researcher David Marler, author of the book Triangular UFOs, An Estimate of the Situation, and a real veteran of the field. And he's led an effort basically to set up and they recently announced this, a National UFO Historical Records Centre. And this is a non-profit organisation which aims to house a physical archive of UFO research materials to be based in the Albuquerque, New Mexico area. And I've got a bit to read out from the press release, but I think it's worth reading out. It's a little bit long, but just to give the clarity. So, quote, "Our mission is to collect, preserve, and provide historical UFO materials to the general public and interested parties. With the accumulated data, we hope to assist with serious research endeavours and aid in an accurate chronicling of UFO and UAP history for the present and future generations, regardless of belief or non-belief in the subject. Individual US researchers and historians have amassed large collections of data over the decades. These have been home-based archives scattered throughout the country. The National UFO Historical Records Centre has been created to gather and centralise this historical UFO data in the United States into a singular freestanding facility. With the physical holdings residing in the Albuquerque area, these will be made available to those who visit in person, while efforts will be underway to actively digitise these materials for global accessibility." Unquote. Now, one thing I'm particularly interested in there is the digitization aspect of this, because that would be an absolutely huge research resource if that ever actually comes to fruition. I mean, can you imagine a database that big, possibly even searchable for keywords as well, hundreds of thousands of UFO case reports going back decades. And I think it's really interesting, the possibility of being able to use AI to actually analyze that huge database as well. And as AI advances in the coming years, that could yield some very interesting results in picking out patterns in the data and whatnot. In fact, that's basically what Jacques Vallée has been trying to do. His involvement in creating huge databases and using his expertise in computer science to use AI to actually analyze the databases and whatnot. The difference is this would be completely open to the public rather than behind like layers of government secrecy and things like that. I suppose the concern here is, though, how much effort and resources would have to actually go into digitizing this database. I mean, like the sheer amount of work to do that, would be pretty intense. And as a non-profit, I would encourage anybody who's got the ability to do so to support the effort if you're interested in the topic. So Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, buddy, send him a few quid, please, and get it kicked off in style. So anyway, what do you guys think of this? And we'll go with you, Ash, I think, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. David Marler, top guy. I'm just
There we go. Look at that, eh?
Great book.
Snap.
I mean, my own sighting was a triangular UFO, so obviously I've always been interested in his work with triangular UFOs. That's awesome. I mean, it's a great thing, and it's not like the only one either, because is it Class Svan in Sweden? He's done a very, very similar thing recently, setting up the UFO Sweden sort of archive. Came over to the UK and got hundreds and thousands of boxes worth of documents and sent them over to Sweden. And then the process of going through all that. So we've got the one in Sweden. This one with David Marler, obviously USA. We all know they got more information probably than anybody else. So yeah, it's a really good thing. And talk about like the resource side of it. I mean, UFO identify we're very, very small scale, and the cost involved just for that is hard. So again, when I think anything when it comes to the UFO field is the funding and trying to get the backers or whatever to actually be able to do it. It's great in theory, and like I say, to have all these archived and put online for anyone to read. Monumental effort, and the cost is going to be monumental to do it just in staffing alone. The amount of time it's going to take to do all that. So it's awesome. I think you're more likely to head out to Albuquerque to see it rather than see it online. I think it's going to be the way to go in the near future, at least. It's going to be the only way to see it, probably. But yeah, good stuff. Like, say, you got the one in Sweden. With, I think his name's Klaas Svan. I think. And even in the UK, we've got John Hansen sort of got his kind of historical UFO little office you can go and visit for £10 and see all the files from the last 70 years or so, based in Warwickshire. So there's a few of them. Obviously not on the scale of David Marler's, but yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I'm not exactly sure about this, but I'm pretty confident I've heard David Marler saying that he's got the largest like physical collection of UFO files in the States already. And I'm pretty sure his actual personal collection is going into this. And I know that there's been other UFO researchers from around the world. There was somebody who Philip Mansell knows from in the UK who actually sent, when he passed away, he sent all of his files to David Marler. So I forget who it was. But yeah, there's going to be a serious amount of files there. And like you say, I think realistically, it's going to be a case of going there, isn't it? Because the sheer amount of work involved in getting that digitized. But, you know, we can hope. Like I say, I don't know if Bezos tunes in, but listen, if you are, mate, you can definitely get it kickstarted.
I think it is Philip Mantle himself who is started sending over his stuff.
Ah, right, okay.
Sort of in advance, so that it's with someone he knows he can trust to get that information, keep it safe.
Yeah, well, it's a good home for the documents and the files, that's for sure. What do you reckon, Dave?
Yeah, he's been building up that archive for years, hasn't he, Marler? And it was a few years ago. I remember hearing him on a podcast about 3 years ago. He was saying he was starting to digitize it. Then he was getting volunteers in. The other thing, he got a Hynax thing from QFOS in America, Center for UFO Studies in the archive, which had all the Hynax papers in it. So he's certainly got Hynax papers. But it's a matter in which he's got all the original things, some of the reports with Hynax pen on it and all the rest of it. So that's brilliant, but the digitisation, as you say, is absolutely key. And I'm presuming they obviously must be scanning the docs, but there must be some program, I'm presuming this, that can read a scanned document and make it into a searchable document. It must be. I mean, I don't know. Just assume that. But that's the key for me to actually do it. I didn't know about that Swedish archive, and I also think you said this to me, Frank. You could maybe put the OSAP. Eventually, you could potentially see all the OSAP files or some of them going into that, because they set up this big repository. It could become a really big thing. I think in terms of the marketing, they probably need to push the AI analysis and what it can do. Because, I mean, there's been loads of things with AI analysis. There's something about the momentum of a thing on a pendulum, and they come up with 3 different potential solutions that humans had never thought of to how that could work. So that, and they do it with photographic spotting and all sorts of things. So it's a real mega potential, increase. So you could market that as a very good thing. So I think you probably need to up the marketing, because I will put my hand in anyway to support it. But I think a lot of people would. But I don't think people understand the implications. The other thing, of course, is you've got this archive of the impossible, which I'm sure you guys on the paranormal podcast, from that side of it, with Jeffrey Kripal, as at Rice University, you've already got a big archive around near-death experiences and all the rest of it. And that's a big thing. That's got UFO stuff in as well, and that's really interesting. So you can see these little critical masses of knowledge building up. And I think there must be something to putting that together so it's analysable. But it is a massive task to digitise it. So I think it's really good. And I think if the academics, and maybe a way to get the academics in as well, they've got a lot of stuff they can look at the leisure. And it really is worth supporting. But the AI, to me, I don't think we quite yet understand the power that will give us in terms of analysing stuff. But if you haven't digitised it, you've no chance, have you? He's done a lot of recordings as well, vocal stuff. There was one he said on this podcast where he was recording onto a computer, and the tape started burning or was going into dust as he was recording. And thank God he recorded the first take all in one, because this tape had disintegrated as he was playing it. Can you imagine that? The stress of that. So he's got loads of stuff on that archive, loads of really, an interview from the 40s it was. Really interesting. So, yeah, I think it's a fantastic effort, and I'll definitely be supporting it. And I think if they market it better, a lot more people will support.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, a couple of points I wanted to make there. The being able to scan something in and then search from it, I think that is kind of a lot easier to do these days. I actually figured this out for my iPhone recently, which is absolutely amazing. If anyone's listening and this is useful for you, check it out. There's a little setting you can click on your iPhone where you can take a picture of like a newspaper, and then you can actually copy and paste text right out of a photograph.
Wow.
I was like blown away. I felt like I was living in the future when I realized you could do that. But honestly, it's so useful for like, you know, making notes if you're researching and things like that, because you can just take a picture of the screen, take a picture of like I say, an article, something out of a book. Like imagine like a paragraph you wanted to quote out of a book, you take a picture of it, just copy and paste right out of the photograph and paste it into wherever you want it. Amazing. Wow. So obviously, we're living in the future, guys. And, you know, obviously, I would imagine there clearly must be a way that if you can do that on an iPhone, you must be able to do that if you were digitizing documents. But again, it just takes ages, doesn't it? You know, to go through page after page and scan them all in that format, and then you know you'd have to have a huge like server or whatever they call it to actually store them on and that kind of thing. But yeah, I believe, and I've not got any notes on this to hand, but I think Jacques Vallée actually started assembling a massive database when he was actually working with NIDS for this very reason, and then that database actually then migrated across to ORSAP. And I believe it's still not available to the public. That's the one you were talking about, isn't it, Dave? And I think part of the reason that Vallée did that was for that very reason, because obviously he's a computer science kind of whiz, and the plan was to be able to actually use AI analysis on that huge database. But as I say, you know, if that ended up at some point becoming public and part of this database, you'd have a pretty large amount of data to get through there, wouldn't you? So it'd be exciting to see how it all plays out going forward. But yeah, excellent work by David Marler and his crew. What do you reckon, Greg? I don't think I've asked you yet, have I, mate?
No, you've left me out. That's fine. No, so just harking back to the AI, just to talk about that quickly. So if anybody has been on social media recently, there's lots of programs. DALL-E is one of them that will create artwork specifically just using some words that you use to describe something, and it will create the image for you. So if they can do that with visual stuff and using it to think for itself about what you want to see, then I can only imagine what they can do with some words on a page and how they can best use that, because they'll be able to pull stats out of there like nobody's been able to do before. The downside will be server size. I think that's the main bit, along with people to scan the pages. But once those pages are scanned, that as long as it's sort of open source as well, if they can get it to an open source state so people can just pull the data, I think that becomes an amazing tool. And people could just pay like a genealogy site where you pay like $5 a month or $10 a month to access all the data. I think that would be a way that you could raise funds, because you're providing all the data, but people they have to do it on a recurring basis. That'd be a good way to pull it up. So if there's stuff always being added, that gives the hook that people can keep paying for it. that they can't mass download everything, so they can't just pull the whole database down and not pay for it anymore. But I think computers and computer processing power now compared to when the reports were written going back decades, it's invaluable that they get it digitized. And like Dave said, if there's a way people can support that, they definitely should. If the UFO Twitter community put their money where their mouth is and stop infighting all the time, you think you'd only need a subscription model of $5 or $10 a month from everybody, and that resource would just be immense. But obviously, haters are going to hate. People will not want to further other people's causes, so that's where another problem will come. And then there'll always be the infighting, as there is with everything. When people become successful, people dislike that. So I think from my point of view, I think this would be an amazing resource for people to learn stuff if they didn't already know about the cases. It's a great tool that people could just dip in and out in one place. And I think if you make it in one place, like a Wikipedia or whatever, that's perfect for people like me who haven't got the time or the brain power to even know where to search. If I just go one place, like a one-stop shop for all the good stuff, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea, and might actually be. I imagine they're probably already considering that, but I might actually try and
I'll
reach
take
out
a percentage.
yeah, reach out and suggest it. But like you say, I mean, the thing is with this is it's a non-profit organization. So even if people hate, they can just hate and hate all they want. But the fact is, if you had a subscription platform like that and people were willing to pay to get access to that database, and like you say, there's plenty of people on Twitter who, love nothing more than sifting through documents, digital documents or real documents. And that's, that's open source analysis, isn't it, amongst the community? And anybody who's willing to pay for that subscription, with it being a non-profit, that's just going to go straight into a pot that pays for the website and pays for more digitization. So the more people who sign up, the more documents end up going on there. I think it's a really good idea. What did you want to say, Dave? You want to jump in there, mate?
Well, you could use. I was just maybe thinking as you were talking, you could use UFO Twitter's sort of argumentative tendency. You could sort of put rumours around of who's put a tenner in, who's put a five, and they could all argue about that. Put more money in. Could put more money in. but I mean, I don't know about a subscription, because I would do that. But I think people sometimes are turned off by subscription because they think they shouldn't pay. But I think if they had a campaign about just putting the money in, just to support it, I think that could be effective as well. I'd be probably something worth looking at. But what I was going to say was, just thinking about the AI, I've seen in some of the best books I've read is where they create a profile for potential different things, and you look at the profile, then you compare it across a load of cases. And this sort of AI will do that effortlessly. You could say, tell me all the cases where they've got red eyes and a black suit or something like that, CT thing. That'd roll them all out. Or you might even say, right, what do you think is the most likely scenario? And it might say, well, we reckon there's 3 different alien races. There's one living underground, and there's obviously a couple of weird, interdimension. I know I'm just talking, but the point is, you could ask that sort of sophisticated question of the database, and it could be really another, again, a step change in the way we're able to, because comparison is the key to this field, and it's so difficult to do it. But once you start to see patterns, then that sort of sets you free in a way, and that's why I think it's so powerful. As long as it's not like the Hitchhiker's Guide, where they say what's the answer to the 42, the meaning of the life, universe, and everything. As long as it's not that, I think it could be a mega tool for us to start really seriously being able to use vast quantities of data and ask some really big questions.
Do you think, though, that you were mentioning about different pockets of people, and you mentioned, Ash, that there's like some in the UK and some in Sweden. Do you think there would be a passion from those people involved to collectively bring together a resource?
No.
Why is that? Why is that? I mean, I don't know. That's really fascinating, that answer.
So it's crazy. It's when I first started it's the reason why I first started UFO Identified like 3 or 4 years ago, because I was trying to find the information and I just couldn't find the information. So I thought I'm going to find it out myself and put it out there, which is what our website is. So I speak to a lot of all the like sort of researchers around the UK to try and do that just on a small scale, pool our information, pool our resources, and get more information out there so that it's there for people to read or to see it. Some will, some are very, very open. I'm good friends with quite a few people around the UK. We share a lot of information. Other groups just will not share the information. It's theirs. They want to keep it. So I ask them, like, well, what do you do with it? Do you put it on your website? Do you put it anywhere? No. Okay, so someone makes a report to you. What happens? Oh, we have it. I was like, yeah, but then what? It's ours. We don't do anything with it. So it's like, so what's the point? Like, and they won't share it. And it's a case of like, it's mine. No one else is touching it. And so I guess on a broader scale, when you have, especially when money comes into it, you're always going to get the people accusing people of trying to make money out of people, profiteering. Which, I mean, the amount of work that this David Marler organisation is going to have, just like you say, it's not in it to make money. None of us are in it to make money because you have to be sort of the very, very small percentage, and the amount of work to do, you have to do it. And the people that do make money both deserve it because the amount of work they do. But you're always going to get the people saying just in it for the money. And then when you got like you got Class in Sweden, David in the USA, John in the UK, they might want to work together, they might want to pool it. But then it sort of comes down to ownership, and that's when things start to get a bit tricky. With that, we have a bigger database, so we should have more share the money. It gets a bit too, how do you sort of organise all this? So that's, I imagine, will be one of the main reasons. And the reason will be people just don't want to work together. And I find that, to my frustration, because all the information we get, we put out there for people to see. So far as what's the point? And some people won't do that. And it's very, very frustrating, which means it's up to them. They want to do that. But then, because people say to me, like, I reported this, but I never heard anything back off it. And they're like, so I don't know. Like, I give him my information, my personal story, first time I told anyone, and then never heard anything back. So they feel a bit confused and a bit wondering why, what, and then they don't want to tell anybody else then because they might get the same response. And that's from like a established UFO group, for example. So I can definitely see difficulties. And sort of talking about a subscription model, again, I got experience in this because for our UFO UK database, we have a subscription level, which starts at £2 a month. And people will pay. And Dave, I know you pay as an example.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's not an advert for you. Actually, you can't just start plugging things.
No, but he's right, because you know they're doing the work and it's bloody expensive, so you don't mind that at all, and that's why I did it, actually.
Yeah, well, and again, it's people like you that helps us keep going, because the 4 of us that do UFO Identified, we don't get any money. The amount of hours the whole team put in every single week, every day, the cost of the website, the renewal's up again in January, and every year it gets more expensive because the website's bigger. We need the bigger server space and stuff every year. So I'm looking at January thinking, it's going to be a big outlay in January. So we're going to be pushing the memberships again, just for the cost of the website, and that's all it goes towards. Nothing towards us for our hours, our time, our research. It's purely for the upkeep of the website. People are still like, oh yeah, it's trying to make money. But yeah, no one makes money.
Hopefully you don't do.
Yeah, well, I mean that leads us on quite nicely, Ash, to some of the upcoming UFO identified events. You were saying earlier on that you have quite a busy time of year. So do you have any bits and bobs you'd like to talk about? Anything coming up that's going to be interesting?
We were going to have an event in November, just due to venue issues. That didn't go ahead. We have a members only Christmas get together. Just again, because obviously when you're part of the membership scheme, you get other benefits, like we'll have invite only events as well as our public events. We've got a Skywatch coming up on the 10th of December up in Chorley. So we have these things going on, and it's busy this time of year because with our database and we put out monthly reports and our annual report. So now we're starting to make sure we've got all the information we need. So this is when we submit over 100 FOI requests in December. And obviously you have to monitor them coming back in, getting information from him, sending out all your information, contacting airports, military bases, governments, officials, departments. So that all happens in December mostly. That's where we sort of hanker down and start pushing all this stuff out. On top of writing articles, updating the website, updating the database, and everything else. I'm putting events on. So yeah, very busy.
Yeah, and some cool bits to look forward to, hopefully for 2023 as well.
Yeah, some big plans for some UK first as well next year. So
I mean, there is a paucity of data, though, isn't there, Ash, in the UK? So what you're doing is really important. I can't believe you put that many requests in. Jesus, that is some going actually in our time consuming it. But there is a big part, so it's important work, just to get it going. So, I mean, as you know, I loved that conference we went to recently, and it had a really good vibe, as you know. Even though it was I went to the one at Manchester, and that wasn't as good because it felt very commercial and all the rest of it. Yet you guys were dealing with as much of a range of subjects, but it just felt a bit more collegiate, and it was decent. I enjoyed it, but it is a good platform to maybe raise awareness about the other stuff you're doing because it's really important. And like, I think that's a throwback, about people not sharing. It's like a throwback to the old world of ufology, isn't it, where they all thought they had the Holy Grail and they better not tell anybody. Pathetic, really.
Mm.
So let's hope this, and given the prominence you've got with doing the events, sort of sets that standard because the UK bloody needs it. God, do we need the data,
we're trying, which we do try.
Yeah, and as always, I'd encourage anybody to get on the website ufoidentified.co.uk. Is that right, Ash? And support the cause. And I'll leave a link in my episode description. And obviously, this show goes out on you guys' podcast as well. And I'm sure you'll be able to stick a link in there as well. And it's just, for me, it's another example of what we're talking about. There's plenty of kind of like people hyping up and, all the rest of it. We're going to spill all the beans in a couple of days. And then there's a lot of very good research going on in the background as well. Like what you guys are doing, like, the David Marler database and plenty of other, sensible researchers putting a lot of good work into the topic. And those are the ones, even though it might not be necessarily like an attention grabber, like somebody saying that all disclosure is going to unfold in the next 24 hours and things like that. That's the good stuff for me. You know what I mean? And another one, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but another really good example of that is the Loose Threads article that's come out. Now, I've talked about this on my podcast a couple of times at great length, and it's a really, really in-depth article. It's like 246 pages long. So we're not going to go into that too much detail now, but that's also something that's happened just over the last couple of weeks, and I'd recommend everybody go check that out. Myself and Dave are going to be doing an episode on my podcast over the next coming weeks, all about that. So even though we're not going to be digging into that too much detail right now, plenty of information to follow on that. So anyone got anything to add before we wrap up another roundtable?
I've got one thing I'm sure you'll be happy to know.
Go for it, mate.
Got one thing. Danny, we've heard a lot recently. We had Danny Sheehan in his interview again. And Lou said this, Melinda Leslie said it recently. The consensus seems to be the phenomenon they're seeing is of extraterrestrial origin, right? That's what they say. I'm going to caveat this. And they're saying there's big, strong evidence for that. So, I mean, I try and keep it all light because I genuinely try not to decide. Equally, me and Frank were doing quotes of Jim Semivan and other people saying it's lived there for ages. It's it's a trickster. It's got these different characters. You guys are doing stuff on your show about that very phenomenon we see that isn't obviously extraterrestrial. And so I think it's really interesting. It's sort of highlighted to me, but the possibility of a number of things coexisting because we sort of say it and it feels like a lazy thing to say. It could be it's a mixture of everything. But actually, to me, there's evidence of both things. We've got Valet, Keel, all these different people talking about different stuff. So I think that was really interesting. The strength of the evidence on the extraterrestrial hypothesis brings that up, and I wonder if there's a scenario where we're thinking of a freeway contact, freeway sort of thing between us, the ET, and whatever the other presence is on the planet. I mean, I don't know if any of this is, well, I know we're here, but I don't know about the rest of it. But that's, to me, was really interesting to hear those people who've been at it for ages and part of that loose threads, a lot of them talk about the ET thing. Very, very interesting. So just to leave everybody or people listening with that thought about how these things are surfacing now, and people are being more definite than they have been.
Yeah, very interesting cliffhanger to leave us on there, Dave. Very, very good, mate. Anybody got anything to add?
Nope.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. It's become a bit of a monthly tradition that I look forward to doing. So, always a pleasure. Thank you all. It's been a good one. I'll see you next month.
I'll see you at Christmas.
Brilliant. Cheers, Frank.
Cheers.
Great to see
Christmas.
you guys. Cheers. Yeah,
Christmas roundtable.
Yeah. Oh, marvellous, yes.
Okay.
Ho, ho, ho.
UFO Roundtable. The UFO Thinker and Pursuit of the Paranormal podcasts.